The story of a CEO pretending to be poor to flirt with a rich girl. And the ending. Marcus Chen had everything money could buy: a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, a collection of vintage cars, and a tech empire worth $3 billion. At 32, he was the youngest CEO to ever grace the cover of Forbes magazine twice. Yet as he stood in his marble-floored office staring at the city lights below, he felt utterly empty. "Another blind date cancellation, sir," his assistant Emma announced, sliding a tablet across his mahogany desk. Ms. Wellington cited scheduling conflicts, but her social media suggests she's currently in the Hamptons with someone named Brad. Marcus barely glanced at the screen. This was the fourth cancellation this month. Every woman he met seemed more interested in his bank account than his personality. They would laugh too loudly at his jokes, agree with everything he said, and inevitably steer conversations toward expensive restaurants and luxury vacations. "Cancel all my meetings tomorrow," he said suddenly. "I need some air." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Sir, you have the board presentation at 9 and the investors' lunch at— reschedule everything." Marcus was already loosening his Italian silk tie. "I'm taking a personal day." The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He walked. Not the purposeful stride of a businessman late for a meeting, but a meandering stroll through Central Park. He'd traded his tailored suits for faded jeans and a simple gray hoodie purchased from a thrift store the night before. His carefully styled hair was hidden under a worn baseball cap, and he'd left his Rolex and designer shoes at home. He felt lighter somehow, anonymous, in a way that money had never allowed him to be. That's when he saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the lake, feeding ducks with torn pieces of bread from a paper bag. Her long black hair caught the morning sunlight, and when she laughed at a particularly aggressive duck, the sound was like music. She wore a simple sundress that looked like it came from a department store, not a designer boutique, and her sneakers had seen better days. Marcus found himself walking closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Excuse me," he said, settling onto the other end of the bench. "Mind if I sit?" "All the other benches are taken." She looked up, and Marcus felt his breath catch. Her eyes were the warmest brown he'd ever seen, and when she smiled, it reached all the way to those eyes. "Of course," she said, scooting over slightly. "I'm Sophia, by the way." "Marcus," he replied, grateful she didn't recognize him. "Are you a regular here?" "Every morning before work," she said, tossing another piece of bread to the ducks. "I work at the children's hospital downtown. The night shifts can be pretty intense, so I come here to decompress." "What about you?" "I'm between jobs right now," Marcus said, the lie coming easier than he expected. "Just trying to figure out what's next." They talked for an hour. Sophia was a pediatric nurse, and the way she spoke about her young patients made Marcus's chest tighten with admiration. She was funny, intelligent, and completely unimpressed by the material things that seemed to matter to everyone else in his world. "I should probably get going," she said eventually, checking a watch that had clearly seen better days. "But this was really nice. I don't usually talk to strangers in parks." "Neither do I," Marcus admitted. "Same time tomorrow." Her smile was radiant. "I'd like that." For the next 2 weeks, Marcus lived a double life. By day, he was the ruthless CEO making decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. By night and early morning, he was just Marcus, a guy who met a beautiful nurse in the park and found himself falling harder than he'd ever fallen before. He learned that Sophia lived in a small studio apartment in Queens, that she sent half her paycheck to her elderly parents in Ohio, and that she'd never been on a vacation that wasn't a family emergency. She dreamed of opening a free clinic for underprivileged children, but knew it would never be financially feasible. Marcus, meanwhile, spun an elaborate web of lies. He was looking for work, living with a roommate, technically true. He lived alone, but the building had a doorman, and getting by on his savings. When Sophia suggested cheap dates, free museum days, walks through different neighborhoods, picnics in the park. He agreed enthusiastically, secretly charmed by her resourcefulness. The problem was, Marcus was falling in love with a woman who would never love him if she knew the truth. "You know what I hate," Sophia said one evening as they shared a $5 pizza slice on the steps of the Met. "Rich people who think money solves everything. I had a patient last week, this little girl whose parents are billionaires. They threw money at her illness instead of just sitting with her being present. The kid had everything except what she actually needed: love and attention." Marcus nearly choked on his pizza. Maybe. Maybe the parents were just scared. Sometimes people who have money don't know how to show love in other ways. Sophia shook her head. That's just an excuse. Money doesn't change who you are fundamentally. It just amplifies it. If you're selfish when you're poor, you'll be selfish when you're rich. If you're kind when you have nothing, you'll be kind when you have everything. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Was he selfish? He'd always told himself that his success was earned, that he deserved his wealth. But when was the last time he'd done something purely for someone else's benefit? 3 weeks into their relationship, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He was going to tell Sophia the truth. But first, he wanted to do something that would prove her philosophy wrong, that money could be used for good, that he wasn't the selfish rich man she despised. Using his connections, Marcus quietly arranged for an anonymous donation to fund Sophia's dream clinic. He worked with lawyers and accountants to set up a trust that would cover 5 years of operating expenses for a pediatric clinic in an underserved neighborhood. The paperwork was complex, but he made sure there was no way to trace the donation back to him. The day the clinic foundation called Sophia, Marcus was with her in the park. "I don't understand," she said, her phone pressed to her ear. "What do you mean, selected for funding? I never even applied for a grant." Marcus watched her face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, pure joy. "They want to fund my clinic," she whispered after hanging up. "Some anonymous donor wants to fund my entire clinic. Marcus, I'm going to be able to help so many kids." She threw her arms around him, and Marcus held her tight, feeling like the biggest fraud in the world. She was thanking him for a kindness he'd done with money that felt meaningless to him, while lying to her about who he was. That night, Marcus made another decision. He was going to tell her everything. He would confess his lies, his wealth, his identity, and hope that what they had built together was strong enough to survive the truth. But Sophia beat him to it. "Marcus," she said the next morning, her voice unusually serious, "I need to tell you something." They were in their usual spot by the lake, but something felt different. Sophia's posture was tense and she wouldn't meet his eyes. "I haven't been completely honest with you," she continued, "about who I am." Marcus felt his heart stop. "What do you mean?" Sophia took a deep breath. "My last name isn't Johnson, it's Wellington, as in Wellington Industries." The name hit Marcus like a freight train. Wellington Industries was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. He'd been trying to secure a meeting with their CEO for months. "You're," he started but couldn't finish the sentence. "The heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune," Sophia said bitterly. "My trust fund is worth more than some small country's GDP. I could buy this entire park if I wanted to." Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. "But you're a nurse. You live in Queens. You eat $5 pizza." "Because I choose to," Sophia said. "I've been living this way for 3 years, ever since I graduated from nursing school. I wanted to know what it felt like to earn something myself, to be valued for who I am rather than what I'm worth." She finally looked at him, and Marcus saw tears in her eyes. "Every man I've ever dated has wanted my money. They pretend to love me, but I can see the dollar signs in their eyes. When I met you, when you didn't recognize me, didn't know who I was, it was the first time I felt like someone might actually like me for me." Marcus felt sick. "Sophia, I know you're probably angry that I lied," she interrupted. "And I understand if you don't want to see me anymore. I just, I needed you to know the truth. I'm falling in love with you, Marcus, and I can't build a relationship on lies." The irony was so sharp it almost made Marcus laugh. Here was the woman he'd fallen in love with confessing to the exact same deception he'd been practicing. She was rich, pretending to be poor, just as he was rich, pretending to be poor. They were both terrified of being loved for their money rather than themselves. "I'm not angry," he said quietly. I'm I'm actually relieved." Sophia looked confused. "Relieved?" Marcus took off his baseball cap and ran his hands through his hair. "Because I've been lying to you too." For the next hour they sat on that bench and confessed everything. Marcus told her about Chen Technologies, about the Forbes covers, about the penthouse and the cars and the billions of dollars. Sophia told him about the Wellington family empire, about the pressure to marry well, about the board meetings she'd been skipping to meet him in the park. When they finished, they sat in stunned silence. "So," Sophia said finally, "we're both millionaires pretending to be poor people." "Billionaires," Marcus corrected. "And yes, and we both fell in love with who we thought the other person was." "But we did fall in love," Marcus said. "The people we were in this park feeding the ducks, sharing pizza that wasn't fake. That was us without all the noise." Sophia nodded slowly. "I was more myself with you than I've been in years." "Same here." Marcus reached for her hand. "The question is, can we be those people in the real world? Can we be together when we're not pretending?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "There's something else," she said. "The clinic funding. That anonymous donation. That was you, wasn't it?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. "I should be angry," Sophia said. "You manipulated me in a way, but—" She squeezed his hand. "You saw my dream, and you made it real. Not to impress me, not to win me over, but because you believed in it. That tells me more about who you are than any amount of money could." 6 months later, Marcus and Sophia were married in a small ceremony in Central Park, right next to the bench where they'd met. They'd learned to navigate their wealth together, using their combined resources to fund not just Sophia's clinic, but a network of free medical facilities across the country. Marcus still ran his company, but he'd restructured it to focus on humanitarian technology. Sophia still worked as a nurse, though now she also oversaw the medical foundation they'd established together. They kept the small apartment in Queens, even though they could afford a mansion. They still fed the ducks in the park every morning, still shared pizza on museum steps, still took walks through neighborhoods where nobody knew their names. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophia asked one morning watching the sunrise over the lake. "Telling me the truth?" Marcus considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I spent years thinking that my money defined me either positively or negatively. But you taught me that money is just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. And what you do, despite it," Sophia added. "You fell in love with a nurse who lived in a studio apartment. I fell in love with an unemployed guy who wore thrift store clothes. We chose each other when we thought we had nothing to offer but ourselves." Marcus pulled her closer. "Maybe that's what real love is," he said. "Choosing someone when you think you have nothing left to lose." Years later, when reporters asked Marcus about his unusual love story, he would always say the same thing: "I thought I was pretending to be poor to win over a rich girl. Turns out I was just pretending to be poor to find myself." And she was doing the same thing. We found each other by losing everything we thought we needed to be happy. The Chen Wellington Foundation became one of the most effective charitable organizations in the world, but Marcus and Sophia never lost sight of what mattered most. Every morning, they still met at the same bench in Central Park. They still fed the ducks, still talked about their dreams, still chose each other over and over again. And sometimes, when the morning light hit the water just right, they would remember what it felt like to fall in love with a stranger on a bench when all they had to offer was their true selves. In the end, Marcus learned that Sophia had been right all along. Money didn't change who you were fundamentally, it just amplified it. The difference was now he knew who he was, a man who had found love not despite his wealth, but because he'd been brave enough to set it aside and discover what lay underneath. The real treasure, he realized, had never been the billions in his bank account. It had been the courage to be vulnerable, to be honest, and to choose love over fear. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.